Welcome to a special edition of the UK Column News. I'm your host, Patrick Henningsen, and we're here in London with two special guests, Jana Yeleshova and Max van der Werf. They are filmmakers and investigative journalists from Bonanza Media. This is an international investigative journalist consortium that comprises of independent journalists from a number of different countries. Last night, we held a press conference, a public meeting, MH17, awaiting trial, and it was very well attended. I think we had more or less a full house at Conway Hall in central London, and we had a number of people on the panel, including Max and Jana, but also from Malaysia, two guests as well, one audio digital forensic expert, Akash Rosen, and also Colonel Sakri. We'll talk about him in a minute. Yeah. But first of all, thank you for joining us. This is a little bit of an unconventional studio location for us, but we're glad to have you with us. Now, yesterday's event, just tell us your impressions, how you think it went, but also let's talk about some people on your panel as well, and your film. First of all, your film, which you released this past summer, MH17.
Call for Justice.
Call for Justice, and this was released, and since then you have been building on top of that investigative documentary.
Yeah, since then we've been able to do a lot of work. We've been able to obtain some JIT documents that we've been leaking.
Explain what the
JIT is. A joint investigation team that are investigating. It's official investigation of MH17 case crash. So we've been leaking the documents, and yesterday we presented another leak. Maybe we talk about it a bit later. And we also been able to travel to Donbass and with new information, check the new information from the leaked documents. And we presented a new video also yesterday to the audience.
We'll show that in a few minutes as well.
So yeah, we've been doing a lot of work. We've been discussing with Max that there's a lot of new information that is surprising for us as well. Yeah. I mean, Max has been investigating this case for 5 years, very thoroughly. And still he was amazed. I mean, he had his doubts about the official investigation. I had my doubts about official investigation. But what we've been able to learn with these leaks, it surprised even us. It was like beyond our expectations how, screwed up the official investigation is. I don't know how to use the proper word, I don't want to sound too...
But it definitely challenges the credibility of the official MH17 investigation.
It raises a lot of questions why the official investigation is being done in this way. Because one of the leaks that we published was, for example, about Australian police analyzing cropped pictures from social media 1 year after the crash. So we were wondering why would they waste, the official investigation would waste their time analyzing cropped pictures. They didn't even have originals to analyze, and that's what they based their conclusions on.
Well, we'll talk a little bit about some of those bits of evidence in a bit. There's audio, there's visual evidence as well. Before we go any further, Max, I want you to just give us a synopsis for those people who aren't familiar with the incident, the downing of MH17. In your words, explain what happened briefly and why this is so significant.
Well, the plane was flying from Amsterdam to Kuala Lumpur over Ukrainian airspace. And
this was on July 17.
July 17, 2014.
Yep.
There were other planes flying in the area, like Air India and Singapore Airlines. It was not closed airspace, but unfortunately the plane was hit by some kind of weapon and it crashed. And it was is crashed in the area that was held by rebels, that is still held by rebels in Ukraine. So there's a civil war going on. There's pro-Russian rebels. They are fighting the Kiev government, and that's how it all happened. The Ukrainian government did not close the airspace, although there were warnings that there might be air defense systems and dangerous other weapons in the area.
Because rebels have been downing fighter jets, Ukrainian fighter jets, a few days before MH17 happened. So there were signs for, closing up the airspace because it was not safe to fly over that zone.
And then when the plane crashed, it's like the international rules, the country where the plane crashes leads the investigation officially. Well, because Ukraine was one of the potential suspects, that they agreed with the Dutch to make an international investigation team. That's why it's called a joint investigation team. And then with aviation law, you need to have like the country that produced the plane, the country that owns the plane, the country where the plane crashed, the country that lost most of the passengers. So you have all kinds of regulations, and that's why they made this joint investigation team. However, surprisingly, until November of the first year, without Malaysia, Malaysia was excluded, which was very surprising. So you could say this is a very politicized air crash investigation from the beginning, and it seems to get worse and worse. And now we have, the status now is that the joint investigation team, the prosecution team, has appointed four suspects, and they will be trialed in Schiphol Airport, Netherlands, in a high security compound. Probably in absentia, starting Monday, this Monday.
Yeah, Monday.
March the 9th.
Right? 9th, yep.
And so what's the significance of this is a real touchstone for the geopolitical battle between the United States and Russia on the big picture. It's also the basis for sanctions as well. Certainly European sanctions against Russia. They've used the downing or the accusation that Russia is responsible. So the bottom line is there was blame apportioned immediately in the press by governments, by the U.S. government, that it was a Russian missile system, or the Russians were backing or instructing the rebels. And the joint investigation team, I was interesting that they immediately came out and said that they believed, or it's likely that the Russians were behind it before any real evidence was presented. It's still to this day, the language is a little bit ambiguous, isn't it?
Yeah, but I think it's also should be said that a few hours after the crash, SBU, its Ukrainian Secret Service, already released wiretaps as a proof that the rebels downed MH17. And in our documentary that we also showed yesterday, we have Malaysian audio expert, proving that these tapes were tampered. But these were the first evidence that everybody based their conclusions on.
Yeah, it's like all the rebels admit themselves they did it.
Yeah, so they were very fast to jump to that conclusion.
Yeah.
Oh, you see, there are wiretaps. And yesterday we also had this Malaysian expert with us, and he made new analysis for us of new wiretaps. Because the criticism was that those first wiretaps that were published by SBU, they're not part of official investigation.
SBU is the
Ukrainian Secret Service. So we asked this expert to analyze the wiretaps that are part of official investigation. And Max?
Yeah, and they were presented in the Joint Investigation Team first press conference in September 2016. So the phone tap, it turns out, is also very suspicious, and the Akash Roshan, the audio expert, is still studying it, but he already had conclusions that some of the things were edited and merged and manipulated. So this is quite significant for the court case, knowing that you have different types of evidence, like phone taps from the Secret Service. They are not reliable already, we have proven it. Anonymous witnesses, some maybe not anonymous, and data from United States secret military.
Classified data.
Classified. So it's going to be very interesting to see how the judge and the defense and the prosecutor will deal with this type of evidence.
And you have to understand, GIT, the official investigators, they admitted that SBU is their only source of these wiretaps. And that's one of major evidence in the case that we basically destroyed with this, analysis
This
of
is
this
kind of-
Malaysian expert.
This is a bit unprecedented. You have two different allied intelligence agencies providing key evidence to the prosecution in an international case like this that's meant to be neutral, it's meant to be fair and not biased. But isn't there a real there's a real danger here that the way that they're collecting and collating their evidence for this investigation, it's actually very different from the way I'm looking at how you're working. In your independent investigation, you're taking a much different approach, aren't you?
Well, the Dutch official investigators, they cannot do their investigation without Ukraine, because Ukraine has all the phone taps. Ukraine, the territory, they control who can go to the crash site and who cannot. So for the Dutch, they're really they have no chance to do anything without Ukrainians. But it's like they say that Ukrainians are very cooperative and they don't cheat and they give the Dutch everything they need. But we just prove that the taps are fake. So how can a potential suspect be part of the evidence on the prosecution team? How is it even possible that this happened in the first place?
So just quickly, Max, how are you looking at this? How did you start approaching this from an investigative point of view? A lot of people have read your blogs, the various blogs that you have published, and a lot of great material there. You're different. Initially, when you came out on this story, you didn't take a side. A lot of people
I still don't.
They felt compelled to either side with the Russian, the pro-Russian side, or the pro-NATO side.
Yeah.
You didn't take really the bait on either direction.
No, you have the pro-Russian sycophants. Anything Putin does is good. You have the pro-Ukraine guys. It has to be a democracy. They have to go away from Russia. Have to become part of NATO. And it's all like, it's like what really happened is not important. It's just when it fits your own political agenda, then you're going to sell the story. The way I approach it is just I look at all the evidence that is presented, and then about the Russian lies, and it is very well documented in the West, so I don't have to put my energy in there. But then about the official evidence that's presented, or the credibility of the open source investigations with low resolutions, video, etc., that intrigued me from the beginning. So I'm not taking sides. I have my own ideas about what could have happened, but I'm not going to share my personal ideas because I don't have underlying proof to back up any claim in that direction. It's just that it seems that every stakeholder, the Russians, the Ukrainians, the Dutch, the Americans, everybody has something to hide. And that's why we don't get the complete picture.
Yep.
So that is my position. I want to take away the curtain and look behind the scenes, which is very difficult
and
to
stay
do.
away from the politics, the political side.
It's almost impossible because people opposing the way I approach this, they have their own agenda, and if you don't agree with them, then you are biased and you are a truther and things like this. So you have to, it's unpleasant, but you have to deal with this.
So, Jana, you and Max have been to the Donbass multiple times. I know you've been a number of times, Max, and you've been on the ground. Tell us, there's a lot of people who have really bigged up the open source investigative revolution in media, and you have organizations that have backing from various state-funded NGOs, like Bellingcat, for instance, and they're given prominent position in New York Times,
of course
on the mainstream media. So you've actually been on the ground to investigate yourself. You've picked up wreckage. You've discovered wreckage from the plane and then submitted it to the authorities there. So what is the
They
big...
were never put on the mock-up of a plane, never. And
yeah.
they never made it to the final DSB report.
That's
although they're part of cockpit. Might
the roof
be,
part's very crucial part you found.
might be very important for the investigation, but no.
What was when you first got to the Donbass, to the crash site? I know you've probably studied this from a distance, and you both have, looked at this, through media. What's it like? I'll start with you, Jana. On the ground, how did what sort of sense or feeling did you get from the residents there about this incident, about the downing MH17? Was it a traumatic incident for the local people there? Was it a surprise?
Well, I think it's absolutely essential to do a ground check work. That's what we've been doing a lot. And I would say that we are very grateful to the locals. They've been very helpful. These people, for them, it was a very traumatic experience. They were absolutely willing to help out in any way they could. Of course, there are some people that don't want to go on camera because of political situation. Again, they don't know what's happening, if they're going to join Russia, if they're coming back to Ukraine. They're afraid of some measures that can be taken against them. But we're so grateful to people who were brave enough to testify on camera, because this is our position. We include in our videos and documentary only people who are willing to go on camera. We don't have anonymous witnesses. So we are really grateful to a lot of locals who were very helpful. I think what we've been able to achieve for a lot of the part is thanks to the locals.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you agree with me? Yeah.
And these people have been traumatized. They have been living in a war zone, and there have been people shredded to pieces by artillery, by, Kiev fired ballistic missiles into civilian populated areas. It's very, very underreported, but this is really going on. And there's, from both sides, there's violations of human rights, there's torture of prisoners. These people go through all this, and they already went through a very difficult time after the collapse of the Soviet Union, when you go a little bit more back in history. So the suffering continues, and now it's like a fraternal war, literally brother against brother, fighting in trenches against each other. It's horrible. And it's really because, Ukraine is on the crossroads between the West and Russia. It's like squashed between these two powers. It's very sad to see.
Yeah, very sad.
We have a clip that you released. You actually premiered it at the public meeting last night. It's a 5-minute clip. We're going to roll that in a second, but just explain, set this clip up. Tell us what it's about.
You're going to roll the whole clip, or?
Yeah, we do the 5 minutes.
A 5-minute
so
clip, yeah.
Maybe it's better to watch it first and then we explain what it is about?
Well, we got a leaked document from a witness testimony.
That's a spoiler, but okay.
That's going to be in the clip.
Yeah.
And then when we watch the clip, we'll explain why we went to this witness. I think it's self-explanatory.
Okay, we're going to roll that now.
Usually when going to Donbass, we search for witnesses going from door to door, quite literally.
This time it was a bit different. We knew exactly who we were looking for.
Alexander! Alexander!
We didn't catch Alexander the first time around. His neighbor said he went to Ukraine for a few days to get his pension, and she gave us his mobile number to arrange a meeting.
So we did, and a few days later finally met Alexander and heard his story.
Так главное, тут никогда пассажирские не летали. Никогда.
Александр Альбертович, расскажите, 17 июля 2014 года, где вы были, что делали?
Я находился тут, на огороде, а вот тут у меня были помидоры. Вон, пустое место, вот тут летит, вот тут почти вот, где вот у деревья орех, пассажирский. Удивился большой, никогда тут я не видел пассажирские самолеты. Облака вот сюда правее, и вот так летел. Его отчетливо было видно.
Вы же не знали тогда, что будет. Почему вы поняли, что это пассажирский самолет?
Так он по объему больше. И летели Боинг, а рядом летят два истребителя. Крыло в крыло, почти крыло в крыло.
Крыло в крыло, 100 метров, 50 метров.
Я не могу точно сказать. Крыло почти в крыло.
Понятно.
А куда военные самолеты полетели, вы говорите?
Они следом по этой траектории шли.
То есть следом за пассажирским?
Да.
А вы еще видели самолет пассажирский или он уже скрылся?
Он еще чуть был виден, а эти уже вот там показались.
Alexander said he told the same story to the Dutch investigators via Skype way back in 2015.
That's when we had to tell him we already knew it and came to check.
А почему вы решили и как вы вообще решили позвонить следователям?
Ну, было по телевизору номер, который не оплачивается, так и так. Кто знает об этой трагедии? На всех телеканалах было.
Вы решили позвонить, и что им сказали?
Сказали, что летел пассажирская, сзади два истребителя. По той же траектории.
Сколько раз у вас был контакт?
2 раза. По
Только
скайпу.
2 раза.
А зачем второй раз они перезванивали?
Говорит, как направление было. Я говорю, какие дальше города? Я говорю, дальше Кировск. Но летел не по Кировску, а левее. Как раз на Petropavlovsk.
Они спросили вас про БУК?
Они говорили, а там установку видели? Я говорю, не было тут установок.
Well, that's probably when the Dutch lost interest and never called again.
Or ever came to check the witness testimony.
Рядом. Рядом. Сильнее.
Don't be deceived by Alexander's simple looks. Despite his simple, uneasy life, he tries to keep up with the modern world and is quite smart and analytical.
This GIT witness was the one who pointed out to us the inconsistency in Wiretap's narrative, published by Ukrainian Secret Service, when the MH17 wreckage was still burning.
Значит, самолет рассыпался в воздухе в районе шахты Петропавловска. Первый 200-й, нашли первого 200-го.
Луганская область. Шахта Петропавловская.
В Донецкой области нет шахты Петропавловской?
Нету, возле нас нету.
There's no such mine in the area where MH17 was falling apart and crashed, says the local. Did SBU edit the content of wiretaps to accuse the rebels of what they didn't do?
We did fact-checking. Other locals confirmed there is no open or closed Petropavlovskaya mine anywhere near Petropavlovka.
But in neighboring Lugansk region, near Lysychansk town, there certainly used to be a Petropavlovskaya mine, now closed. And 14th July 2014, just 3 days before the MH17 crashed, rebels did down a fighter jet exactly in that area.
So is that what the wiretap was really about? Because now it certainly sounds like it.
That was a fantastic clip. I mean, really well produced from a cinematographer's point of view and also from a production point of view. Great piece of film. Just explain to us how that story, how you got that story and how you sort of plugged into that particular witness.
That, Max?
Oh, well, we obtained a leaked document about this Alexander who lives in this Yanakievo town, city. And, well, we decided to visit him and to ask for his side of the story.
To
so
check
you
his
see one
testimony,
document is
yeah.
one thing, but when you meet the guy live, it's really exciting. Like the settings, like he lives in the pink house and all that. It's like, wow, I was very excited to meet him. And well, you can explain better what we discussed with him.
Yeah, so we didn't tell him where we knew about him from, who we knew about him from. So we just said, oh, you know, we heard that you saw something on 17th, you remember? That's when the Boeing crashed. So he talked to us, he gave the testimony. We could compare it with what we saw in the leaked document. It matched.
Yeah.
So that's when we told him, you know, we actually knew story already. Yeah, he looks like, you see, he looks like, I don't know.
Secluded.
Yeah, secluded kind of.
A loner. Yeah.
You would think that, you know, he leads some kind of not normal life or whatever. He doesn't have teeth. But that's because he had been a miner for a long time, so that's how he lost his teeth. But the more we talk to him, the more we realize that he's a really smart guy. He cares about things that go on.
Maybe it's also relevant to mention that when he was a conscript in the still Soviet Union times, he worked at the air defenses, so he got very interested in planes and everything. So he's always following everything, and he's much smarter than you would see in the clip itself. Well, you see, he has a laptop, he has Wi-Fi, he has Skype. He talked, he contacted the investigators himself. So don't
they talked on
underestimate
Skype.
him.
Yeah, investigators called him, and they had a Skype session.
There's some condescending remarks on YouTube, and that's really these people should be ashamed.
And then he tells us, oh, you know, these wiretaps, the rebels are talking. They're not talking about this time MH17 was down. And we're like, Why not? And he shows us this clip and he says, Petropavlovsk mine. There is no Petropavlovsk mine in this area. Yes, the plane started crashing at Petropavlovka.
It's a village, Petropavlovka.
Yeah, in Donbass, and he says, but there is no Petropavlovsk mine there. That's not how we called our mines here. It's mine number 2. We call it by numbers, so no local, no rebel would ever refer to any mine in the area as Petropavlovsk mine. But he says there is Petropavlovsk mine in neighboring Lugansk region. And 3 days before the crash, rebels did down their plane, but a fighter jet,
a Ukrainian,
July,
14th of July.
Yeah.
So you think that they spliced that wiretap into a different conversation?
Yeah, implying
Akash
that...
Roshan, already, the audio expert, already dissected this tape. It's doctored, it's edited, it's glued together from different conversations.
You see?
So it would be fabulous if Alberto, with Alexander, with his thinking, we can prove that it was really doctored because it's from an event that happened 3 days before. So we're still working on this, but it shows how bright this man is.
To frame the rebels for MH17.
And so that was totally happenstance, that you weren't expecting to get that information, but you can only get that when you're on the ground investigating and talking to real witnesses.
To be honest, I only picked it up when she explained it to me when we were in the car already leaving.
Well, yeah, because of, Russian language and everything.
Yeah.
But, I mean, that's why I'm saying locals really, they've been so helpful. Because things like that you would never know until you talk to locals.
Yeah, and one of the big divisions and splits in the two opposing main theories of what happened is that the Western narrative really centers around the rebels using a Russian book surface-to-air missile system, and they shot down the plane, and then that book came from Russia and was driven back to Russia after the plane went down. And then there's an opposing narrative, which is that a Ukrainian fighter jet might have, for whatever reason, shot the plane, or that it might have created a situation of confusion on the ground, whereby
could have been a target for a ground-to-air missile and it missed.
From the Ukrainian side or from the rebel side, you don't know. But the eyewitnesses that you spoke to, there's multiple eyewitnesses that have testified to fighter jets being in the same vicinity at the same time with MH17, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's absolutely impossible to ignore the fact of the presence of Ukrainian
It's impossible.
fighter
All
jets.
these people are lying, and that's if you interview them now 5 years later, maybe they don't remember the exact weather situation. Maybe they cannot describe exactly how far the plane was. Can you describe if a plane is 3 miles distance or 5 miles? The sound. So let's say the joint investigation team should have collected all these evidences right from the start and put pressure on Ukraine. You guys had fighter jets in the area. Please don't lie. What it has eventually with the reconstruction, what really happened, if it's significant or not, that is another matter. But these planes were there. And I repeat it, you're a conspiracy theorist, you're a truther. Yeah. To use the words of my opponents, if you deny that these jets were there.
We don't have all answers, but we have so many questions. And this is one of the main questions. Why are you denying the presence of fighter jets that day in the close vicinity to know what happened to MH17? Why?
And Ukrainian radar systems were working.
Yeah,
They're lying about this, that they were all on maintenance.
Has radar data that would show the presence of jet fighters around MH17, has that been released or has that been presented?
Well, the Russians claim they have it, and then they claim they didn't see it with another radar. So the Russian position is very confusing. To be honest, I'm disgusted by the fact they don't clarify this and they don't release the military radar data. So this obfuscation from the Russian side, it's also not acceptable to me. But the Ukrainians, they're definitely lying. They do have the radar data. The primary and secondary radar, they have it. They have the military, like mobile Malachit systems. They have all that. They've covered the whole area.
But they haven't presented it?
No, and the Dutch are not pushing them. They're criticizing Russia for not giving proper radar data. But the Ukrainians, they don't deliver the same type of data that they have, and they're not criticized. It's like then they say, "Oh well, we have enough information. We don't need the radar data. But if Russia,
then the narrative
Russia messes
changes.
up,
Yeah.
then they say,
Or Russia
they don't help the investigation.
It wasn't in the right format. The Russian there was another criticism.
A lot of
the
nitty-gritty
Russian
up and down.
technical-
But also, Max, the document that we leaked yesterday for the first time, the minutes where the countries that are part of GIT discuss this radar data situation. For one thing, Malaysia was not present at this meeting again because they say they couldn't reach Malaysia on the phone.
Well, so far we have only published 3 screenshots. We still have to publish the complete document.
Yeah, we're going to do that. So they're discussing about Russia and Ukraine providing radar data. They say media raises questions. Well, Russia and Ukraine provided us with some information. But media is also asking questions about American satellite data. And the document says that they didn't provide us with anything. And that was also for us revelation.
Officially there's cooperating and there's talk behind the scenes and the investigators get to see all the evidence that the Americans have, even if it stays classified. But then when you see the document that is secret, you see it's not at all.
It's February 2016, and they say that Americans didn't provide us with anything. And it's also amazing because with this recent Iranian plane,
the Ukrainian Airways flight that was shot down as it took off from Tehran International Airport during the standoff between the U.S. and Iran, and there was a downed jet, and so eventually, after 48 hours, the Iranians said it was an accident. It was a surface-to-air missile was triggered, a system was triggered, and it shot this plane down. But the main evidence for that came from the U.S.
Exactly.
That made it a big media event. So why can't the U.S. provide that satellite data for the MH17 incident?
I have no answer to that question.
That's a good question.
That would help, wouldn't it?
Maybe you should ask your president.
Oh yeah, you're an American, yeah.
There's a lot of questions that people would like to ask our president. But let's just talk briefly. We'll have wrap it up in a few minutes. But the politicization, the political pressure that must be on the joint investigation team. Now, we have seen recently with the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, the OPCW, which is also based in The Hague, about the Duma, alleged chemical weapons attacks in Duma. And there's been leaks coming from the OPCW, employees, engineers, people who are on the ground who said our findings weren't presented in the final report. And so what this showed us is there's a lot of political pressure coming mainly from the United States because it's a high-stakes geopolitical game. But do you think there's potential, well, this is happening with the joint investigation team as well, all these are supposed to be neutral, designed to be non-biased, designed to be neutral, not to favor a particular side. But is the reality something different? Is that what's happening? Are they neutral? How significant is the political pressure on this particular?
I think better the Dutchman answers this question.
Really?
You understand Dutch better than me.
Well, let's look at the joint investigation team. There's Malaysia, it's the only independent neutral country, not part of any bloc. You have Australia, it's part of the Five Eyes. You have Belgium, you have Netherlands, part of NATO. You have Ukraine with the regime change after the the Maidan revolution. So you have a very strong bloc, anti-Russian bloc. And then you have Malaysia a little bit on the side, separate, trying to wiggle in between, try to keep good relations with Russia and with the West. So it's very obvious that this is a very extremely politicized investigation. The choice could have been to include Russia as one of the suspects and Ukraine as one of the suspects and say we do an international investigation, we do everything transparent. The choice was made not to do it, and this has to be, the reason why it is secret. There is a secret agreement of what these countries agreed with each other. So it's just very clear to everybody that this is a politicized investigation, and of course, there's pressure from the United States. There's no hard proof, but everybody understands that there's different entities struggling against Russia. There's an information war going on.
Yep.
There's almost a real war going on, like in Syria, when you talk about OPCW. So yes, this is one of the most politicized air crash investigations of all times. I think everybody
I
will
agree.
agree.
Yeah.
And so you've also been attacked by a number of mainstream media outlets. Most recently, the BBC,
Yeah.
monitoring. They took a swipe really at one of the leaks that you published with Bonanza Media. By the way, the way that you're doing this is very unique. So you've produced a documentary film. You have an ongoing investigation. You're doing live streams. If you receive leaks, you're vetting them. You're double,
Yeah.
triple checking everything.
Oh, absolutely.
We have a lot of leaks that
Yeah.
we didn't even read yet.
Yeah. So you're very careful with
Yeah.
what you publish, and you're triple checking
careful.
everything.
Yeah.
And then you're doing you're presenting this to people who are subscribers, followers,
Yeah.
supporters, and also continuing with the film production and the investigation. So this is kind of a process that you're doing. It's very different than most people. They do the whole film, they'll wrap it up, and they'll move on to the next project. You've got
Right.
kind of an ongoing investigation here that's now running parallel with a trial, which is happening in The Hague starting next week. So it's a really
That court case is going to last for like 4 or 5 years now that there's a defense team. But maybe also I have a question for you about OPCW, all that. But your 21st Century Wire, you're following not only MH17, like we are a little bit
Yeah.
one-trick ponies at the moment,
Yeah, at
but
the
you
moment,
do
yeah.
like the whole spectrum of geopolitics. So the name Bellingcat keeps popping up also with OPCW. So could you educate us about this?
I think Bellingcat, open source investigation organizations like this, they're the main one, and they're also receiving the most awards, the most plaudits, they're getting the most funding. But
Unbelievable.
I think this is like a reliance by the establishment, the mainstream press. They don't do real investigative work anymore. So what they do is they outsource that, or they depend on the Bellingcats of the world to provide evidence, to to fill in a narrative that's already been decided in advance. And in the case of MH17, the narrative was more or less unanimous.
Yeah,
when it
Putin's
happened.
missile, that was after a few hours.
Putin's
but the
missile,
Duma
yeah.
thing, what was the official narrative? And I read about a certain Mr. Henderson, and there's Peter Hitchens very active. Could you explain in short, there's like a paradigm
Now we're
shift?
switching. Now we're interviewing Patrick. Okay.
No, I think just in brief, the leakers have gone and given information to what they believe were trusted sources.
But these are inside people in the OPCW.
These are people
Yeah,
who are on the ground.
that's what I understand.
One of the only engineer on the ground in Duma actually was Ian Henderson. But there's also internal leaks coming about interference by U.S. officials inside. Agents showing up in the OPCW, in the office of the executive, with fact-finding people saying, no, this is what happened.
We talk about chlorine cylinders. They were dropped by the Assad regime from helicopters, and then the chlorine gas leaked, and then people died. So
That's
that
the
was
allegation.
official-
Yeah.
That was the allegation, but not. Yeah.
It was based on 2 or 3 YouTube videos that came out. In the U.S., France, Britain made their decision based on what was online before any investigation took place. And they were very adamant to rush their military action before there was investigation. So what is that? That's open source mentality. That's like, well, it's on the internet, so it must be true. So YouTube starting a war, basically, is what we're facing here. I don't think MH17 is that different in this case.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Do you see the similarities in
Absolutely, absolutely. But not just Duma, not just MH17, but so many other, the Skripal affair in Britain as well. This follows some of that pattern as well. This is the future. So I think it's very easy to manipulate public opinion by laundering the findings of open source investigators through the mainstream media, gives it credibility. Like the SBU wiretaps, nobody questioned that in the mainstream media or the officials in Holland either. They just said, wow, that fits our narrative. So
Exactly.
this goes in
Yeah.
right front and center in terms of evidence. So I like what you're doing. And of course, the reason I got interested in Bonanza Media and your work was because you're taking an evidence-led approach. And I don't see many people doing this especially on high-profile events, and this is when you need it most.
Oh, we're very careful with our claims, but the fact that we challenge the official narrative already enrages and outrages people that they cannot deal with this.
Yeah. All we get is insults and labeling.
From somebody.
That's it.
Yeah.
Nobody's debunking anything we present. You see?
And all the leaks we present, they're very insignificant, but they feel the need to comment on it. So they could maybe just
and
ignore
insult.
us then.
Yeah, insult.
Well, if you're a good referee, at the end of the match, half the stadium is going to be chasing you out to the parking lot, and the other half is going to be cheering you. This is just the way it goes.
Okay.
Unfortunately,
I'll keep that in mind.
Or in this case, all the stadium is after you as well. So, but before we wrap it up, just explain to us. There's different ways that people can support you, your project, and how can they support you? Where do they go to help out Bonanza Media? But also, how could they subscribe, for instance, to your email newsletters and things like this?
Can you cover that, please, for me, partner?
Yeah. Okay. Well, we are not sponsored by the Kremlin. We don't get money from €500,000 from the Dutch Postcode Loterij. So we're really dependent on small donors, and anything that you give to us helps us. If we want to go back to Donbass, you can support us through Patreon, through PayPal. My personal bank details are on the YouTube channel. When you go to Bonanza Media on YouTube, we have a Twitter account. There's many ways to contact us and to support us, and really asking you to do it if you like what we're doing.
And you might be launching a website soon, I
Oh,
think,
yeah.
as well.
We have so many
We're with the
things
two of
on
us, and we have a million things to do.
And you also have a few other projects that you've worked on. I mean, there was a very interesting film you made about child services.
Oh yeah, in Norway.
Taking children in Norway. That's also available on your channel right now.
Yes, it is, and thank you for mentioning it, because it's also it's a different topic, but also devastating what's going on with this. So yeah, I mean, MH17 at the moment is taking all our time, 24/7.
But the Norway story she's working on, it's like children from foreign parents are taken away by the Norwegian government and placed in Norwegian families under
Foster
completely
care.
under completely crazy allegations. So but she's now busy with MH17. But this is one thing she's really also coming back.
We're going to do other projects, of course,
Yeah.
but MH17 is so huge, and we're lucky to have a lot of material to work with. So yeah, we're totally devoted to that topic at the moment. But hopefully we're getting more and more audience, and more people will support us, and we get more and more.
We see it happening already.
Yeah, and we get more and more, people support and crowdfunding. And yeah, we're hoping to do more projects in the future, definitely.
Well, but I can say from what I've seen from your work, Bonanza Media is absolutely independent, absolutely nonpartisan, and really sound investigative methods. Your methodology is very good. You're very transparent about it as well.
Yeah, but
and I like this.
That is also thanks to people like you, who just hosted yesterday the event, just because you like us and you appreciate what we do. The same, the people we work with, they don't ask much. They just help us do good product because they're also they care about what we're doing. So yeah, but still I think that people should get paid decent money for their work. That's why you have to understand, and filming, it takes a lot of money. So that's why, of course, we have to ask all the time for financing. But yeah, it's a hard way, but I think we'll get there when we'll be able to do more and have more resources. Yeah.
Well, keep up the great work, and we'll be following you closely. Obviously, we're going to be going to The Hague as well. The trial's starting next week. That's going to be very interesting, but that's just the beginning, I think, of a process that's coming. But thank you, Jana Jelešova and Max van der Werf. Thank you very much. Bonanza Media is the organization, and we're glad to have you joining us today on this special edition of the UK Column. I'm your host, Patrick Henningsen. Take care, everybody. We'll see you next week.